Even the medics were moved to tears by what Princess Charlotte did after meeting Lily, an 8-year-old child with burn scars. It all began a few weeks prior to May 2. Princess Charlotte was getting ready to celebrate her 9th birthday. But this one was unique because it wasn't the kind of celebration that most 9-year-olds would anticipate, much less one that involved royalty. Unlike past years, there were no gaudy headlines, no Instagram-perfect photographs, and no party tent on the royal lawn. Princess Charlotte opted for something more subdued and profound, something that would have an impact on a young girl in a hospital. Are you curious as to what it is? Keep an eye out. What would you like for your birthday? Was the standard question. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had asked her daughter weeks prior. However, rather than asking for a pony-themed art kit, as she had done the year before, Charlotte tried something new this time, making strawberry cupcakes and a new skipping rope. She took a while to respond. The quiet was odd for such a lively and talkative child. "I'll let you know," was all she said before returning to her sketchbook. Although she was aware of this change, Catherine chose not to press. In fact, Charlotte had become more reflective during the past few months, like that silent moment at the late Queen's burial, when she softly reminded her younger brother to bow as the procession passed. There had always been a sense of maturity about her. It has, however, recently gotten considerably deeper. In addition to royal duties, she had begun to inquire about the people they met at engagements, the charities her mother sponsored, and the children who were less comfortable than she was. Though it was subtle, there was a noticeable change. Catherine made the decision to take her kids, George, Charlotte, and Louis, on what appeared to be a straightforward outing just 2 weeks prior to her birthday. The visit to Royal Manchester Children's Hospital was calm. It was a hospital just outside of London. They initially planned with no press or public notification, but because of their prominence, the media learned about this visit. Therefore, it might have appeared to be a common gesture to outsiders. However, it had a deeper meaning for Catherine. She had always appreciated Princess Diana's intimate visits to hospitals, shelters, and charitable organizations with William and Harry. She opened their eyes to the world outside the royal gates, not to take pictures. This visit was no exception. In addition to honoring Diana's legacy, Catherine saw it as a means of teaching her own children a crucial lesson, that the privilege of their position included a duty to look out for others. Something changed that day, particularly for Charlotte, as they strolled silently through the pediatric wing of the hospital. As the hospital personnel had taught her, she wore a delicate scarf knotted over her hair, and a pale green disposable gown over her clothes. She appeared less like a princess, and more like any other youngster attempting to behave appropriately in a strange environment. With her brothers right behind her, she followed her mother down the hallway, her shoes barely making a sound on the shiny floor. The walls were covered with drawings of castles, animals, superheroes, and one really happy rainbow that had obviously been there for too long. The ward also smelled like soap and disinfectant. They encountered a boy named Ethan in the first room they went into. He was about Louis's age, perhaps a year older, with kind eyes and a shaved head that added to the delicate appearance of his features. Meningococcal septicemia, an uncommon but rapidly spreading bacterial infection, had caused Ethan to lose both of his hands. He explained to George that he was in 4th grade at the time. He claims that up until he passed out at lunch, it was an ordinary school day. He informed them that he had spent weeks in critical care, had almost died, and that the illness had spread so swiftly that the doctors had to act rapidly to rescue him. But they were unable to preserve his hands. As a result, Ethan was having to relearn how to perform routine chores. He was eating lunch that afternoon with specially designed utensils, a spoon fastened to a soft brace on his forearm. His nurse was standing next to him, encouraging him gently. Charlotte stood motionless at the foot of the bed and watched. Even when Ethan labored to pick up a small portion of mashed potato, she continued to stare. Quieter, a sort of reverence, took the place of her normal inquiry. She had never seen a youngster her age so transformed, so courageous, and yet so composed. They encountered an adolescent girl in a wheelchair who had undergone treatment for bone cancer in a different room. She chuckled when she showed Charlotte a notebook full of poems she had written about her nurses, and when George inquired about her favorite video games. The family nodded, grinned, and listened. However, Charlotte's eyes had a tenderness and a serenity that had not been present before. Even though the visit was just supposed to last a few rooms and a few hellos, every stop had an impact on the kids' lives. Then came room 12, the one that made all the difference. Stay put. The air seemed to change as they entered the final room of the day. They encountered a young girl inside who was gently propped up in bed. She had layers of white gauze covering her left side and an extremely rigid stance. Her arms, shoulders, and neck were still recovering from the burns, a patchwork of suffering and fortitude. She was 8 years old, the same age as Charlotte at the time, and went by Lily. She had a sketch pad on her lap and was sketching a dog nestled under a window, even though her fingers were heavily bandaged. The shading was straightforward but purposeful. Carefully lay each pencil stroke. It was more than a diversion. It was survival with a focus. At the threshold, Charlotte paused to absorb everything. Sitting close by were Lily's parents as well, her mother fixing a blanket's edge softly. Her father is observing his daughter with weary but loving eyes while holding a water bottle. They stood tensely upon seeing the royal guests. However, the nurse gave a short smile and motioned for everyone to stay calm. Before anyone could respond, Charlotte took the stage to speak. She spoke quietly but inquisitively. She looked at the bandages and asked softly, "What happened?" Lily raised her gaze from her drawing. She did not talk immediately, but she was not shy. Rather, she turned to face her mother, who nodded gently, allowing her to continue. Finally, Lily remarked, "There was a fire at our house. When it began, I was in my room. The door was heated when I attempted to go. I was unable to open it." Charlotte's eyes became wide with shock. "How did you escape?" Lily looked at her father and said, "My dad and the firefighters broke the window. They hauled me out after climbing in from the garden." Her father added in an emotional voice that she was unconscious when we got to her. "Had we been 1 minute late, he didn't complete. He was not required to." Lily returned her attention to her sketch. "It still aches a lot, even if they say I'm lucky." Charlotte took a step toward him. She studied the drawing. "Is that your dog?" Lily gave a headshake. "I simply draw the numbers." "I enjoy dogs. I have one," Charlotte muttered. "Orla is her name. I also attempt to draw her, but I'm never able to get the ears just right." Lily smiled at that. An uneven smile eased the tension in the room. "You draw?" inquired Lily. Charlotte asked. "All the time?" "It helps me think, especially when I'm anxious." The girls continued to discuss drawings, dogs, and the annoyance of noses that never seemed to fit. Lily's mother used a tissue to wipe at her eyes in silence. Catherine took a step back, her eyes darting between the two girls, unspoken but obviously moved. "The visit has to end eventually." The nurse nodded modestly and respectfully. Charlotte stepped back a little, then stopped. She pointed to the drawing and said, "You're really good. Next time, I might bring mine." Lily asked excitedly, blinking, "Would you then return?" Charlotte's face softened, but she did not immediately respond. "Hopefully," she said. Catherine put a gentle hand on her shoulder as she turned to leave, and they walked out into the corridor. Something happened as they were leaving that ultimately changed Lily's destiny. They had nearly arrived at the end of the hallway, when Charlotte abruptly stopped, saying, "Keep watching to find out." "My scarf," she turned to Catherine and said. Catherine nodded and allowed her to return alone, followed discreetly by a member of the medical staff. "I left it on the chair." The door was still ajar as Charlotte made her way back to room 12. She entered quietly so as not to wake anyone. However, she heard voices as she went for the scarf that was draped over the back of the visitor's chair. Lily's parents. They spoke quietly but tensely. According to her mother, the doctor told she will require more surgery. Her shoulder became encircled by burns. It has an impact on bone growth. Waiting too long can restrict the development of her arm. "We are already behind on payments," her father moaned bitterly. "Everything we had was depleted by the previous surgery. The transplant was not completely accepted. They'll have to re-enter." The mother went on, "I inquired about financial aid. However, the list is lengthy, and the burn treatment alone costs hundreds of dollars every week." Charlotte held her scarf and remained still. It wasn't only about suffering or recovery. Time, money, and a girl her age, who would not receive what she needed, because it was too expensive, were all at stake. It was unusually quiet on the drive back to Windsor, as Charlotte joined her family. As the afternoon sun moved across the horizon, Charlotte sat close to the window and traced hazy designs with her fingers in the glass. Since they left the hospital, she had been silent. Behind her, George and Louis were having a quiet conversation, but she wasn't paying attention. She only mentioned room 12 and Lily's name in hushed tones. Staff wrapped up in the kitchen later that night as the house fell into its regular routines. Charlotte discovered her mother in the drawing room, while the lads were upstairs with their books. Catherine was sorting her mail, carefully opening envelopes. When Charlotte came in, she looked up and grinned. She said, "Did you forget something?" At first, Charlotte didn't respond. She moved to stand in front of the fireplace and gazed at the tiny flame that warded off the summer cold. When she eventually said, "I know what I want for my birthday," Catherine's head cocked. Charlotte nodded. "You do?" There was a pause before someone said, "I want to help Lily. I want to pay for her surgery." Catherine shut the mail and focused entirely on her kid. "That's really lovely of you, my love, but why suddenly?" With calm gaze, Charlotte turned to face her. She started softly as I returned to retrieve my scarf. I overheard her parents conversing. The money was the source of their fear. They had no idea how they were going to cover everything. Her mother was in tears. She twisted her fingers together and looked down. "Mommy, she's just 8. She was grinning despite the fact that she couldn't even open her hand correctly. She was drawing as if it were painless. Catherine moved forward, bending to eye level with her. "Her skin is hurting her bones," Charlotte muttered, "so she needs more surgery. According to her father, it could prevent her from growing up and moving normally." Her voice was one of serene confidence, devoid of drama. Reaching out, Catherine stroked a lock of hair from Charlotte's cheek. She replied softly, "We can talk to the hospital. Find out what she needs." Charlotte gave another nod, saying, "We'll see what's possible." Catherine grinned and said, "But can it be from me? Not from you or Papa, just me." Private preparations were made the next day, and the hospital administrator was tactful, touched by the gesture, and guarded the secret of both families. When Lily's parents learned of the news, her mother broke down in tears, while her father sat in stunned silence, holding the letter in one hand and the envelope in the other. A donation of 39,000 euros was made directly to the hospital's surgical fund, reconstructive procedures, and several months of physical therapy. The surgery was set for the following weeks. There was no birthday cake large enough to equal the feeling she had when she slipped that card into the envelope. But inside was a little card with a dog sketch on the front and a plain note that read, "Keep on fighting. Lily with love, Princess Charlotte." The letter had a palace seal, but Charlotte did not tell anyone else what had happened. The surgery was set for a Thursday morning, just 12 days after Charlotte's birthday, and it would be a delicate skin graft procedure that would help Lily regain mobility in her left arm, where scar tissue had started to tighten around the growing bone. She didn't need a candle to blow out that could carry such a wish. This time, for once, she didn't want anything else. Charlotte had asked to see Lily the night before the operation, and Catherine had kindly agreed. So they made the short trip back to the hospital after school. That morning, the hospital wing buzzed softly, nurses moving with gentle urgency, parents whispering with fear and hope. Despite the pain and the bandages, the little girl's smile was genuine and wide. "You came back," Lily said. "I promised, didn't I?" Charlotte asked, sitting by the bed. She was wearing jeans and a soft hoodie with her initials on the sleeve. Orla's hand-drawn paw print peeked out of her pocket. She took out a fresh sketchbook with white, pristine pages. "When you're feeling better, we'll come up with something." There was little discussion of the procedure between the two females. Charlotte didn't like that. Instead, they fought about whether it was tougher to draw paws or tails, giggled about dog names, and silently colored a page's corner together. Charlotte gave Lily's unbandaged hand a light squeeze as it was time to leave. "You're braver than anyone I've ever met," she replied. 5 hours were spent on the procedure. Although Catherine kept Charlotte informed, the hospital administrator personally called to break the news. It had gone well. "Lily will start therapy in 2 weeks. The graft had taken well." When Charlotte heard, she smiled. "Good," she said. "She can now complete our drawing." Over the following month, Lily's condition steadily improved. She became less swollen. Gradually, her mobility restored. Without assistance, she started to sit up and even resumed her drawing. She then made a silent but firm request one day, when her parents were helping her extend her arm while she recovered. One that took everyone by surprise. "Remain with us," Lily said. "I want to tell people what happened. Not only the flames, but everything, particularly her." Her parents were initially taken aback. They wished to remain silent. They had a straightforward explanation. They wished to respect the privacy of the royal family and keep Lily safe. However, Lily was adamant. She claimed that I wouldn't be recovering in this way if she hadn't assisted me. People ought to be aware. Thus, one lovely afternoon, Lily sat in front of a camera in her room with the assistance of the hospital and her parents' consent. The bandages were now thinner, and her hair was softly pinned back. The page of her sketchpad, which she was holding in her lap, showed a dog with a large, uneven nose and slightly crooked ears. "My name is Lily," she introduced herself. She explained about the visit, the sketch, the note, and the present. And someone really kind helped me when I needed it most. Her name is Princess Charlotte. She didn't want people to know, but I do. Lily continued steadily. She gave me a chance to get better, and she made no demands other than that I should continue drawing. With her family's consent, the hospital's media staff posted the video. Although it was brief, just under 3 minutes, it started to go viral online a few hours later. The elegance, generosity, and quiet courage of two girls moved people all over the world. One recovers, the other discovers what compassion means. There was an abundance of praise in the comments. Though not all of the responses were positive, one viewer wrote bluntly, "Charlotte was just being opportuned." Another viewer simply stated, "Diana would be proud. Charlotte is truly following in her grandmother's footsteps." Still another viewer commented, "This brought me to tears. What a beautiful act of kindness from someone so young. She wouldn't do this again, really." Even though Charlotte never spoke out, and Catherine graciously turned down requests for interviews, those close to the family said only this: "It's all about approval ratings, politically driven, just like the rest of them." Nevertheless, thousands of other people expressed awe, hope, and gratitude, drowning out that comment. What do you think of Princess Charlotte's gesture? How do you think this act of kindness will shape Lily's life as she grows up? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. The princess smiled throughout the entire video, even promising to stay in touch with Lily. Because sometimes the best way to celebrate isn't with a party, but by leaving a quiet, lasting mark on someone else's life. Please click the following video that appears on your screen. You will adore it. We would also appreciate your feedback. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more.